Welcome, everyone, to the International Green Industry Hall of Fame induction ceremony for 2021 and 2022. We're delighted to have you with us today, and we recognize that this is a difficult time for those whose lives have been upended by conflict or extreme weather. Our thoughts and prayers are especially with the people and the wildlife of Florida who are coping with a major hurricane this week. May you find the shelter and support that you need. My name is Tom Bowman. I'm an inductee to the Hall of Fame and a former member of the board of directors, and I currently serve on the advisory board. And I can tell you that induction into the Hall of Fame is a very meaningful step for all of the inductees. It's an accomplishment, of course, because it recognizes significant and pioneering work. But it's also much more than that, because the Hall of Fame helps leaders connect with other pioneers and build new relationships that contribute to a better world. IGIHOF, or the International Green Industry Hall of Fame, recognizes pioneers, leaders, innovators, visionaries who make significant contributions to their industry and far beyond. IGIHOF is committed to preserving the rich history of these great people and organizations by constructing a virtual Hall of Fame that is always available for free to the public. At gogreenhall.org, you will find bios and resources and links supporting a growing community of purpose among people who are making significant contributions to a better world. And I can tell you from personal experience that when you put innovators and entrepreneurs together, you should just stand back, because the energy and creativity that results from those combinations is really remarkable to see. Starting about a dozen years ago, in 2012, IGIHOF has combined its recognition ceremonies like the one today with conferences that bring experts in sustainability, business, science, and public policy together with university and high school students. And this focus on fostering the next generation of sustainability leaders is a remarkable and extremely unusual feature. And although COVID-19 has temporarily curtailed this aspect of the annual events, the IGIHOF community continues to work behind the scenes to foster connections and to mentor students. In fact, much of the production work today has been donated by some very generous and talented university students, and we thank them for their help. At today's ceremony, we will hear from those types of leaders, including Dr. Michael Mann, who is one of the world's foremost climate scientists and a thoughtful and compelling spokesperson about humanity's capacity for meaningful action. We will also hear from Bob Taylor, co-founder and creative visionary behind one of the most innovative musical instrument companies in the world, Taylor Guitars. Bob not only pioneered innovative firsts in guitar manufacturing, including introducing acoustic guitar world to remarkably comfortable neck shapes and new body styles, but he also established a supply chain and ethos that preserves many of the tone woods that musicians rely on and the forest communities that support local economies all over the world. So we thank you for joining us today in celebrating and honoring green industry pioneers. I have the privilege now of introducing our first keynote speaker, and he is someone who I truly admire. I mentioned that Bob Taylor is an innovator in the music industry, having invented many revolutionary guitar manufacturing techniques, and I happen to be the happy owner and player of a Taylor guitar myself. Bob and Taylor Guitars are making equally impressive contributions to sustainability through the preservation and restoration of forests, responsible procurement of raw materials, forestry research and planting initiatives in Hawaii and Cameroon, urban wood sourcing, and transitioning to employee ownership of the brand. Bob is joining us by video today.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bob Taylor, co-founder of Taylor Guitars, and I'd like to start by saying that it's a privilege for me to be able to speak to you today, and what an honor it is for Taylor Guitars to be inducted into the International Green Industry Hall of Fame, along with this year's other esteemed inductees. We're truly humbled by the recognition. I'd like to thank you for that. I made my first guitar when I was 17 years old, and I started Taylor Guitars when I was 19 with my partner, Kurt Listug. We didn't know anything about anything then, let alone sustainability. And I thought I would just sort of share with you some of the things that we learned along our journey of 48 years of being in business about sustainability. We're a company that uses wood to make our product. And because of that, I've traveled around the world and I've seen how our wood is cut, where our wood is cut. And somewhere along the line, I had a kind of a revelation, a breakthrough, where I realized that the time that I'm living in, I'm really going to cross the threshold from the way forests were managed, the way forests used to be, to the way forests are going to be. And it started making me think about, what can Taylor Guitars do? What can we do as a company to ensure that we have wood in the future and that we're helping to protect and revive forests along the way? So here's some of the things that we've learned. Well, in 1974, when we founded Taylor Guitars, I was 19 years old, and I really knew very little about anything, let alone sustainability. That was a word that wasn't even used at that time. But we had to figure out how to run a business, and it turns out that one of the key components of learning to run a business is efficiency. Like, are we wasting materials? And since our guitars are made from wood, start to finish, those materials were precious to us. So we started working on a lot of ways to make sure that we could find the guitar in that piece of wood, that we could even fix and repair wood to make a guitar out of it. Just to be able to survive, we learned how to not waste any of our wood. And it turned out that that put me on the path to environmental thinking and sustainability in a greater concept. Sustainability is a never-ending journey. And they say if you think you're humble, then you're not. And I can apply that same thing to sustainability. We never will be sustainable. It's a journey. We're on a path towards more sustainability all the time. I urge you to stop your marketing team from saying that you're sustainable, because that sort of infers that you've arrived, there's nothing more that you can do, and there's always something more that we can do. It goes a long ways when you communicate honestly with your staff, with your customers, with your vendors. And when you do it in a fashion where you don't quit. We've been producing a magazine for the last 25 years. We talk about issues at Taylor Guitars, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And when you run across a company that does something like that, you tend to respect them. For instance, here's an interesting story. We started, the whole world has got this shrink wrap around it. You go to Home Depot, you go to anywhere, and you see pallets, and we wrap it around. We use this stuff at Taylor Guitars. It's a miracle. Well, it turned out that we weren't able to dispose of it anymore. It used to be that some people would take it away. And so we said, what are we going to do with this? This is building up. And I said, put it in the middle of the parking lot and build a mountain out of it and put a giant sign on it so that everybody going by and everybody that works at Taylor Guitars can just see it. So we did that. We aired our dirty laundry. We took up parking spaces, and there it was, until there was this giant cube that looked like a plastic Borg. And it had a sign. What is this? It's a problem. We're going to try and solve it. And we got on LinkedIn, and people gave us ideas, and ideas started flooding in. And the next thing you know, we found somebody that could recycle that material into the bags that we use. So we went from single use to at least a double use. And that's twice as good. It's not all the way there, but these are the things that can help when you just put it right out for other people to see and let them help you solve it. We have a little saying, we like to get in for more instead of get out for less. And, it seems like getting in for more is super rewarding. We have another little saying at Taylor Guitars, in 10 years, we'll be glad we did. Sometimes we start a project and you can't really go into the accounting office and give an ROI on that, a return on investment. But we can say in 10 years, we'll be glad we did. We did that in Cameroon with our ebony company Crelicam, which then evolved into ebony planting. And now we're talking 50 or 100 years before we see the result of that. That's happening in Hawaii with the koa trees that we're planting. That's the long game. I heard somebody say years ago, invest in the inevitable. Think about that. That's a concept that can really drive your actions today. I have another friend that likes to say, adapt, migrate, or die. And the world is changing. These things are true. Those are your three choices. So at Taylor, we try to adapt. Sometimes we migrate. We don't want to die. And we love to invest in the inevitable. So we try to look way ahead. Quick story, 25 years ago, maybe more, I realized that mahogany was going to be harder and harder for us to obtain in the ways that mahogany has been logged. And in reality, to be modern, we needed to be primitive. In order to do that, we had to change the way we make guitars. We had to change the design of the body and the neck. We retooled our whole entire factory so that we could use mahogany that was cut in a primitive fashion. I won't go into all the explanations of that, but it was a complete retooling of Taylor guitars, and we benefit from that today. It's nearly 30 years later, and we're benefiting from that every single day because we can go into small communities that are roadless, where people in a primitive fashion cut the wood, the money goes straight to the community, and we don't have to have a big modern sawmill or a lot of different types of grading expertise, because if they just cut the tree in this simple fashion, we can use that and the money goes straight to them. So it's direct to source, it's soft on the forest, but we had to adapt the way we make guitars to be able to implement that. Let's face it, let's be honest. The amount of ebony trees that Taylor Guitars is going to be able to plant in Cameroon isn't going to change the world, but it's a demonstration case. It's a project that demonstrates that it can be done. And many of the things that you do, if you're able to publicize them and if they're honest, and by the way, we have a little saying that the only thing better than a good story is a good story that's true. And if what you're doing is true, and what you're doing has got a lot of honesty behind it, and it's having some success, you could be the person that inspires the next big player to come along and really, really make a difference. So even if your company's small, you can do a lot of things and you can demonstrate that it can be done. Turn trash into treasure. I have a friend that says your wealth is in your waste, and I think that's true in an office and a factory floor both. It's equally true everywhere. Everything we do produces some type of waste. The sawmill produces waste. In our case, we have this ebony sawmill that's cutting for musical instrument grade wood, and there's all this leftover wood. So what can we do with it? Well, we found avenues for it to go into the knife industry. We started making accessories for Taylor guitars. We even started a new company called Stella Falone that makes kitchenware with ebony product. We call it orphaned wood because it really has no mother at that point, and it was just booted out. Now, we could take that same concept out into the urban tree, because here trees, you've seen a tree being cut down and maybe they leave a pile of firewood on your street corner for the neighbors to take advantage of, or maybe they're taking it out and they're just grinding it up and turning it into mulch. But some of those trees can make a guitar, and we've managed to tap into that. So the waste on the street, the waste at the sawmill, and even as we cut things down in the factory, we take these smaller pieces and make something. It takes a little bit of resource to get into that, but with a little bit of effort, you can do that. We kind of like to say we like to use it all so that we can cut less. Because if you think about it, if we eat the heart and throw away the rind to make a guitar, and the rind goes out, and somebody else goes and buys new wood to eat the heart and throw away the rind for their knife or their kitchenware, everyone's throwing away something. But if we can cooperate with different industries in between each other, we can say, hey, I've got this thing that can work for you. It takes a little bit of work, some phone calls, some compromise, but it's a way to move waste materials around to somebody else that sees it as a treasure. Manufacturers these days have a responsibility to know how their materials are sourced. And all too often, it's easy to just hide behind them, push all the responsibility onto them. But you need to go. You need to make your expectations clear. You need to travel. It's a good idea to go out and know these suppliers and see what their issues are and see how you can help. And take that responsibility on yourself and just get out there and visit and see with your own two eyes what's going on, and help your suppliers do a better job. I'll tell you a little story. we reached a point where we had a lot of initiatives to do and a lot of compliance to live with and a lot of worries about the world. And a lot of us had a lot of ideas. We'd been working together for decades, but it came to pass that we needed to hire somebody that was good. So we hired a director of natural resource sustainability, person, I'll mention his name, is Scott Paul, and he has about 35 years of conservation policy under his professional belt, many years with Greenpeace and with other NGOs, and is well connected. Well, we hired him into this position, and we're really just a guitar company. I'm not sure that anybody else has made this move in their company yet. What typically happens in companies about our size is you take the director of procurement, maybe your legal staff, and you put a few people together and they try and do that job. It's a bigger job than they know how to do. And sometimes procurement people are more interested in price than they are sustainability. They have goals that they need to meet. So to take a position like this and sort of set it off to the side to where maybe like your safety people, you know, your workplace safety people, you hire a safety officer and they have to work alongside the company, but they're really protecting that. So we have this position at Taylor where somebody can then work with our marketing department, our procurement, our production, and be sort of that hub. And it's made a huge difference in the initiatives that we've been able to accomplish. So how do we carry this into the future? Well, our solution right now is we've become 100% employee owned. And we did that by forming an ESOP. It's an employee stock ownership program. And so today's Taylor Guitars, which I'm showing you, is now employee owned. I no longer own any stock, but I get the privilege of working here with everybody that's part of Taylor Guitars right now. 1,500 people across the globe work for us. But because we're employee owned, I feel like I can give you a little bit of a peek into what tomorrow's Taylor Guitars will be, because everybody that works here has this running through their veins because of all the decisions. You never really know what you're deciding today, how it can affect something in the future. We know that we can make bad decisions each day. Every time we throw a piece of single-use plastic in the trash, we all know that we shouldn't do it. But we can do the opposite of that too. We can make good decisions today, and we all know that it's going to be something good in the future. I'm proud of what Taylor has been able to do over the nearly 50 years that I've been the owner of it, 48 years now. And I'm proud that we have a succession plan that makes me feel highly confident that our employee owners, we can't say employees anymore because we've connected two words. We say employee owners around Taylor, that they're going to continue these initiatives that we've started. And it makes me feel great. It makes me feel really wonderful about where we are and where we're going. And I just want to say that I feel fantastic about what's going on, and employee ownership is, I think, one of our crowning sustainability marks.
Thank you, Bob. What an amazing series of insights and practical suggestions for any business. That was truly impressive and inspiring. And I'm delighted to say that Bob will join us in person later on to answer your questions near the end of our ceremony today. And now we're pleased to recognize this year's IGIHOF inductees. Nominations to the Hall of Fame are open to anyone through the IGIHOF website, gogreenhall.org. IGIHOF reviews and evaluates all nominations according to a set of criteria that emphasizes pioneering change. And here are those criteria. Number one, has the nominee produced significant innovations? Number two, are these innovations pioneering in their field or market or industry? Number three, have or will their contributions be transformational? Number four, has the nominee demonstrated best practices in their field, market, or industry? Number five, was the nominee first to market with their innovations? IGIHOF is focused on recognizing the pioneers. And 6, although this last criteria is less important when we're focusing on innovators, has the nominee been noticed and recognized by others? Those are the criteria for evaluation and admission into the Hall of Fame. And with that said, let's meet our 2021 and 2022 nominees. Acelia Africa is a safari travel company in Africa that is recognized for their extensive initiatives and deep commitments to making a positive impact on the crucial wilderness areas of East Africa and to the peoples who live and work there. Accepting on behalf of Acelia Africa is Peter Thompson.
Hi everyone, good to be here. Can you hear me? Well, I hope you can. So yeah, I'm dialing in from Kenya. It's a bit past 9 p.m. I had to dodge and duck and dive a herd of crazy buffalo getting to the office, but I made it and here I am. So yeah, basically, you know, to be recognized on an international stage for our work in this field is an honor. To be included in among the other inductees speaks worth of all our combined efforts. It's a big motivation to continue. So in East Africa, growing human populations often conflict with the conservation of natural environments. So we at Acelia, our positive impact work, it supports projects that equally work to improve the lives of local people and protect the surrounding nature. So we've adopted an areas approach mentality, whereby we consider how to holistically protect whole areas and ecosystems at a time. Yeah, we look beyond the core wilderness areas of our camp's locations to include buffer zones and corridors that sustain these regions. So for nearly 18 years, we've invested in a balanced mix of wildlife conservation, community development, and education programs with the aim to bolster the long-term sustainability of the areas. So Acelia, we were the only safari company in Africa to be GERS rated, ranked platinum. We were in the top 10 impact companies in the world. So we're now in the process of a new B group rating. So yeah, like it's just been said, we endeavor to support the critical wilderness areas which are in desperate need for financial and conservation support. So for example, our Sayari camp was the first camp in the Kokatenda region in the northern Serengeti, which was previously a poaching paradise. So every year the migration went through that area, you know, 50,000 upwards of 50,000 wildebeest were poached. But now it's one of the most established and profitable areas due to our presence. Great. Yeah, look, a few of our main projects we work closely with our implementing partners and continue to support the MAR Trust. So you'll see a couple of figures there. Those figures, we've since 2015 we've implemented a $5 per person per bed night that we take off the end invoice, and it goes towards all these different little projects. You can see the COVID affected year in there, but you know it just shows how much effort we put into supporting these our partners and our projects. So the MAR Trust, we as a company are the largest donor. The trust implements various community projects, you know, such as youth empowerment. There's beekeeping, the FGM education. You know, that's an alternative rites of passage for the young girls. There's healthcare in the community. There's water and sanitation, and one of their main objectives is the beadwork project. The rhino arc as well, you know, established in the late 80s as a response to the poaching of the black rhino population. It now implements fencing projects in the for the water towers of Kenya. So basically, illegal logging and charcoal burning, you know, it's a revenue stream for the communities in these regions. You know, that's critically depleted the forest cover. So the protection of these water towers is key to the health of the Mara River, which is a vital necessity to the Mara Serengeti ecosystem. I also have there was just another one, the Kenya Wildlife Trust. It's it's one of the most important research hubs. within the Mara. So they partake in a yearly wildlife census, as well as community engagement. They use their findings to initiate valuable and lasting community development projects and wildlife monitoring programs. So the next couple of slides, these are projects, our own initiatives. We've been pioneering in this sense. So our flagship program, Twende Porini, it literally means in Swahili, let's go to the bush. So it's a children orientated project. It aims just to change the mindset of the students, school students, from the local communities where we operate out of. So Twende Porini, it takes these pupils through a series of tailor-made lessons, fun-filled activities, and it's intended to ensure that the students are well exposed, is inspired, and ready to take care of the natural resources around them. So basically, in a nutshell, Twende Porini prepares the children to appreciate the values attached to the ecosystems, as well as to ready them to receive a call from nature to be the next generation of the decision makers and nature wardens. So this is a $25,000 project, and it's an activity that Acilia funds annually. Although, through sponsorship in cases, we're able to do 2 of these years. It's such an amazing little project. 16 of these children come through camps. They're treated as guests. So I've been lucky enough to do 2 of them already. And yeah, we've got a 3rd one lined up in Kenya in March next year. So Robondo Island, the chimpanzee habituation project, in the 60s, it was Bernard Grismek, I think I've got that right, Dr. Bernard Grismek, from the Frankfurt Zoological Society. He took 16 chimps that were relocated from West Africa, and just created this little haven for the chimpanzees and other endangered species like the Sitatunga antelope and the colobus monkey. So to this day, that population has grown to 60 plus individuals. So these are the only reintroduction of the wild chimpanzees from West African populations to East Africa. It's viewed by many conservationists as a possible future for some of these species. And basically, studying and understanding these chimps is important for the future, of other chimpanzees that might need rescuing. So Acilia's Robondo Island camp, the camp that's on that island, it's the only one there. It's the only revenue source that keeps that park protected and the chimpanzees safe. So this is a really cool project, one of my favorites, the Usangu wetlands. So in 2019, we launched a project to learn more about the Usangu wetlands. So it's a region in the Ruaha National Park in Tanzania. So the 2nd largest national park in Tanzania. So, we seek to determine how the area could be sustainably developed to promote investment for safari tourism. The research, it's instrumental in learning about and monitoring the unique ecosystems and ecological trends. So again, the Usangu Exploration Camp, which opened in June for the wider public, it's the only camp in that region and the only revenue generation for the area. So yeah, these projects, is what we've initiated. And another really cool one is a microbrewery. It's the Serengeti's first solar powered microbrewery. Again, it's in Sayari camp. By having our own microbrewery now, we're able to produce our own beers, soft drinks, as well as drinking water, sparkling water, using renewable energy. This removes the need for bottles and the cans in camps. It reduces the waste along with its transport carbon footprint. Yeah, so there's a couple of different little projects. We've also got a stock control system. Since 2018, we've moved everything to online. So previously we kept paper bin cards for every single item, and every day we would use paper requisitions for these items. There's over, there's a couple of hundred items in each of these units, and there's 17 spread out within our company over East Africa. So we've figured it out. We're saving approximately 886,000 pieces of paper, 4,000 reams of paper a year. Along with the training and development of our staff, again, we invest in our employees. There's 900 plus people within the company. So, our heart and soul is within the people. So even during COVID, the training didn't stop. At the height of the pandemic, we were able to launch a new training program to help upskill the young Kenyans and Tanzanians working for the company. As well as being one of the two largest contributors to carbon offsetting through Carbon Tanzania. Last year we offset 1,500 tons. We're also working on a project in Kenya called Carbon One. So it's still in its fundamental stages, but we'll hear more about it and know on a wider group, throughout the year. So these projects that I just spoke about, they're but a brief overview of what we do. But yeah, all in all, Acilia's mission statement best describes our ambition for the future of this world. We strive for a sustainable, transparent, and viable future, starting from within, which is important to reach the wider demographic. So again, it's an honor. It's great. It's a first Hall of Fame to be inducted into. So thank you very much. Very much appreciated from on behalf of Acilia.
And that was an inspiring and impressive way to think about running a business in a place like Africa or in any other crucial ecosystem in the world. It's very inspiring. Our next inductee is called Climate Action 100 Plus. Climate Action 100 Plus is an investor-led initiative to ensure that the world's largest corporate greenhouse gas emitters take the necessary actions on climate change. With more than 700 investors responsible for managing $68 trillion in assets, Climate Action 100 Plus is working with companies to improve climate change governance and financial disclosures. Accepting on behalf of Climate Action 100 Plus are Seiji Kawazoe and Rebecca Makula Wright.
My name is Seiji Kawazoe, and I'm a senior stewardship officer at Sumitomo Mitsui Asset Management in Tokyo, Japan. I am an investor representative at Climate Action 100 Plus and currently serving as a co-chair of a steering committee which runs the initiative. Today, I would like to thank International Green Industry Hall of Fame for recognizing the works and achievements of CA 100 Plus for inducting us into the Hall of Fame in 2022. Me and CA 100 Plus co-chair Rebecca Mikkel Wright are here on video to receive the honor of being inducted on behalf of our steering committee members and, more importantly, initiative signatories. I would also like to take this opportunity to describe our activities and achievements and game plan going forward after Rebecca introduces herself. Rebecca, please.
Thank you, Seiji. Hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca Mikula Wright, the CEO of the Asia Investor Group on Climate Change and the Investor Group on Climate Change. And those two networks cover 11 different markets in Asia, as well as Australia and New Zealand. And we are two of the 5 networks that manage the initiative, including our partners at Ceres in North America, the Institutional Investor Group on Climate Change in Europe, and the Principles for Responsible Investment. And we coordinate investor expectations for companies to support the engagements, as well as other resources through the initiative.
CA 100 Plus is a global investor initiative which are launched in 2017 at the One Planet Summit as a voluntary initiative that brings together and builds on a number of pre-existing investor-led initiatives across the world. Together, we engage with 166 of the world's largest and systemically important emitters. As of September 2022, the investor base has grown to 700 investor signatories with a total of $68 trillion in asset under management. The initiative has become a household name for investor-led engagement initiative. The initiative's objectives are mainly 1. Strong governance of the companies, 2. Decisive action and goals towards Paris Accord level greenhouse gas emission goals, 3. Corporate disclosures based on climate-related frameworks such as TCFD.
And the Climate Action 100 Plus initiative really represents a global step change in active ownership for investors, engaging and working with the companies in which they invest and are part owners of to address the business impacts of climate change is consistent with their fiduciary duty and is essential to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. So the initiative launched the results of the second net zero company benchmark in March of this year, which measured focus companies on their progress against the initiative's 3 engagement goals that Seiji just outlined for us, and a set of key indicators related to the business alignment with the goals of the Paris Agreement. So just some high-level results showing that 69% of the 166 focus companies have now committed to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 or sooner across some or all of their emissions footprint. This is a 17% significant year-on-year increase from the first benchmark assessments only published in March 2021. A strong governance framework is necessary in articulating a board's accountability and oversight of climate change risk. In these benchmark results, we found that 90% of focus companies have some level of board oversight on climate change. And finally, 89% have provided enhanced corporate disclosure in line with the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, or TCFD. So we have seen some incredible progress through the initiative, but we do acknowledge there is an incredible amount of work still to do, especially in areas like aligning capital expenditure with net zero goals, ensuring interim or 2030 targets, and the need for a just transition to be incorporated into these targets and the business strategy and planning is really critical as companies and economies transition. We do know we're having success in the partnering of international and local investors together in company engagements to provide the local market knowledge and deep understanding of the markets and regulations that these companies are working in. And this has been really critical to the progress of the initiative in all regions across the world. So going forward, we're now planning phase 2 of the initiative as we approach the end of its initial 5-year timeframe. And we're mapping out the strategy to 2030 to ensure that we're supporting more ambitious and constructive investor engagement with focused companies through Climate Action 100 Plus. So thank you very much again for the incredible honour of including Climate Action 100 Plus into this year's International Green Industry Hall of Fame. We will continue to work tirelessly with investors to ensure companies are transitioning to net zero and aligning to the goals of the Paris Agreement. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was an impressive piece of work that is ongoing and critical to all of us. Quite amazing. Our third inductee this year is Good Planet Innovation, which is catalyzing a paradigm shift in the entertainment and advertising industries towards sustainable and regenerative production and event practices. As they transform the model for creative production, they are also inspiring conscious consumer behavior by integrating eco-friendly, healthy, and ethical products and behaviors into major motion pictures and television shows. Accepting on behalf of Good Planet Innovation is Michael Kaliski.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me here. It's such a great honor to be inducted into this amazing organization. I've kind of lost my voice, so I'm going to keep it relatively brief, hopefully. I come originally from film and TV production. I had a production company geared towards humanitarian environmental issues. And I had an epiphany about 12 years ago that while, you know, these kind of films are important to make, they're generally preaching to the choir. You do a film about the environment, the environmentalists show up. You do a film about animals, animal rights folks show up. So I realized that we need to get this messaging into mainstream content. We have to have James Bond drinking out of a reusable water bottle. We have to have Brad Pitt driving an electric car, Julia Roberts, you know, eating a veggie burger, this kind of stuff. So that was the launch of Good Planet Innovation about 12 years ago. And immediately after we launched the company, we realized that the film, television, advertising, and concert industry, big event industry, is incredibly wasteful in their actual production practices. So we went on a journey to make production zero waste and carbon neutral. So we do that by integrating resource recovery. In fact, we don't really use the word waste very often, because really there's no such thing as waste, only resources put in the wrong place. So we educate the crews about composting, recycling, making sets out of reclaimed materials, and then donating those sets to local schools and theater companies, reducing flights. These days, increasingly there's virtual stages becoming available. While you're running that or setting that up, in the film, TV, and advertising industry, as well as concerts, we have such a massive audience that we can really inspire people to change their behavior and to normalize sustainable and regenerative behavior. If you guys start paying attention in films and TV shows, you're going to see more and more of this. Because think about it, if you see a film that has like a flip phone in it, it looks so dated. I mean, unless it's a period piece, of course. But I think that's going to be that way for single-use plastic water bottles, and other wasteful behavior.
Hi, everybody. We'd like to introduce you to Michael Kaliski, who's going to be our partner on greening Old Navy's production and CPB's current shoot.
Hey guys, Michael Kaliski from Good Planet. Been in basically in the green space and the media space for over 20 years. So I have the great pleasure of combining those skills and knowledge base to help green this set. We got a lot of great programs.
Yep, so we're going to take you through and show you all the great things we're doing. One of the initiatives we're doing on this set is that we have recycling and composting. So you can see our actual trash can is tiny compared to what we're saving. We also have renewables, washables, like regular knives and forks and plates, and compostable knives and forks and plates.
This is a huge improvement. This is the way that the set should be run. There shouldn't be so much waste.
And it doesn't slow down because you guys are so busy.
No, that's what's so funny is people think that it slows you down. You have all three cans standing next to each other. It takes 2 seconds to get into the rhythm of where you put your stuff. It doesn't slow it down at all. And I mean, yes, there's the extra added bonus that there are people that are telling us what goes where. But again, that only lasted 2 days. Nobody needs it anymore. You go, you recognize which can is which, you throw it in, you walk away. I mean, an infant could trash things properly.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And compost.
Yes, correct.
I've ripped it just like you told me.
Tear test. And what did we learn?
It's fiber.
From the tear
It's
test?
fiber, and that means it's compostable. Huh? See?
Thanks.
I learned.
Thank you.
You taught me well.
So every day after crew has lunch, we donate all the food that's left over to hungry people around Los Angeles. And this is Lauren Selman. She's working with us at Good Planet Media, and she'll tell you a little more about our food program.
So with our food program, it's really important that not only we feed ourselves, but there are thousands upon thousands of hungry people throughout Los Angeles. So we've partnered with a local food agency who comes here every day at 4 o'clock and feeds the church right across the street. Each one of these boxes has 20 pounds of marshmallows in it. So we're hoping that they can find a new home tonight. The marshmallows will also be going to some local camps, Camp Hollywoodland, Camp Tumbleweed, as well as Lou Dantzler High School. And so lots of s'mores and lots of fun. Hi, we're here with Emma, Pal, and Ishmael, who are taking away some of our sets to help us donate and be more eco-friendly here on our site.
Thank you, Old Navy, CPB, Smuggler, and Good Planet Media, along with SIOP, for donating the art supplies that we can utilize at ISF Public Schools.
Well, we What do you think about the Good Planet's green initiative?
I have been very impressed with Good Planet in general. The program has made me more conscious, more aware day to day of the impact that we have on the environment, or the impact that we can have on the environment. I've often thought on jobs how many hundreds of water bottles we generate every day, plastic that ends up in these gigantic, islands of plastic. You just have to be a little conscious. It just has to, and then you guys suggested we do it, and then to really implement it, you gave us our own really spiffy water bottles, Exhibit A, and now we have no excuse.
And how many people do you guys feed tonight? 100 people on Tuesday night. Oh my gosh. And there are the marshmallows.
There's a marshmallow.
And we're going to have lots more.
How do you feel about what CPP has done to answer Old Navy's requests to green our TV production?
Yeah, it's been awesome. I think we've been really happy with the result. We are on our third day of production already, and have seen a big difference just in terms of how people are acting around set, excited about composting, recycling, and just seeing what's, I think, good for us is seeing all the stuff that would go to waste, how much you're actually saving. Someone mentioned the other day how small the garbage cans were, and it makes you realize when you're on set, usually it's a ton of big garbage cans everywhere, and now when you just have one little bin, you realize actually how much you are recycling and composting.
Have you seen any sort of things that make you think, well, maybe we won't do this again, or do you think we'll definitely want to continue doing this in the future?
I think we'll definitely want to continue it. It has been a very seamless process, and to be honest, I think everyone else on the crew is actually very excited as well, so that's really cool to see. Cool.
Awesome. Thanks for bearing with the stilted video. But anyway, that's just a glimpse. We launched a nonprofit, or I co-founded a nonprofit called Green the Bid, specifically for the advertising industry, to shift the global advertising industry to sustainable practices. And that organization already has most of the major ad agencies and production companies committed to making all of their productions more sustainable and regenerative. So we're on a good track. And, where it's like, I don't know what happened to my video. It's just turned off. But there's a picture of me and my dog. How's that? But anyway, thanks again, guys. Appreciate this. And I'm in such great company as well. So congratulations to my fellow inductees.
Thank you, Michael. My background was in the events industry, different kind of events, corporate events, trade shows, air shows, things like that. And it's so great to see an initiative to reduce waste in these industries that are so accustomed to throwing so much away. So congratulations and thank you.
We did the
Our
pilot
next
program for Live
inductee is
Nation.
already a household name to anyone who has ever visited an airport. What you might not know, though, is the footprint reduction and clean air vehicles for ground operations, and so much more. Accepting on behalf of JetBlue is IGIHOF founder and chairman, Sam Guile.
I am really pleased to be accepting this award for JetBlue. They send their regrets. They had a last minute issue where the sustainability chief could not attend because of the weather back in Florida and turnover in her department. But she sends her regards. But I want to encourage everybody to go to the JetBlue website and really look at JetBlue in action. That's their big initiative. And what got them noticed by us, obviously, was a nomination by somebody in the general public, but it was their Farm to Air project in 2015. The one thing that is green video, and they have partnered with carbonfund.org to help them with their sustainability efforts. But the thing that I think is really cool is the fact that they were the first carrier to fly carbon neutral for a month in the world. And they also have their very first uniform recycling program. So JetBlue has done a lot of innovative things in the area of environmental sustainability, which their team should be really proud of, and we should be really happy with. And so with that, I am very happy and honored to accept the award for JetBlue. Thank you. And thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Sam. You know, I live in Long Beach, California, and had the opportunity of touring JetBlue's ground operations. And it was at the Long Beach Center for JetBlue that they, in fact, actually started the in-flight recycling program. And it was started by the flight attendants. So this is a company that was listening from the bottom up and made a significant change in the industry. So it's great to have them in the Hall of Fame. Thank you, Sam. Dr. Thomas Lovejoy is being inducted today into the Hall of Fame for a lifetime of achievement and service. The late Dr. Lovejoy, who unfortunately passed away in 2021, was an ecologist and president of the Amazon Biodiversity Center, a senior fellow at the United Nations Foundation, and professor of environmental science and policy at George Mason University. He was an advisor to the World Bank and the UN Foundation, and the first biodiversity chair at the H. John Hines III Center for Science, Economics, and the Environment. Dr. Lovejoy coined the term biological diversity, which most of us know today as biodiversity. He was a highly influential person in the sciences and public policy making. Accepting on behalf of Dr. Lovejoy is IGIHOF inductee, Dr. Michael Benelli.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, and thank you, everyone. This is really a special honor, and I feel completely humbled for being called to accept this award on behalf of Tom Lovejoy. Tom was a giant whose impact went way beyond the quality of his scientific work. He was instrumental in raising awareness by the public, by policymakers, and by decision makers alike concerning the adverse impact of human activities on other life forms, highlighting in the process the far-reaching implications of these impacts. Thank you to the International Green Industry Hall of Fame, to its founder, Sam Gill, and the whole IGIHOF team for this very deserving recognition. Instead of citing the long list of Tom's achievement, I will say a few words of a more personal nature. I first met Tom when we were both working with the World Bank. We collaborated on a fascinating project, the Mesoamerican Biological Corridor. The idea was to establish an open corridor free from human interference all the way from Mexico to Colombia and across all the Central American states, allowing for free migration of wildlife and securing habitat, especially for the region's jaguars. It was an important concept, a very bold vision, and Tom was very passionate about it. Needless to say, fragmented regional national politics made implementation impossible. Later, I saw Tom often when he served as president of the Hines Center. I was sketching out the idea of establishing the sustainability laboratory at the time, and Tom was always very generous in offering support, ideas, and his time. Last year, the Sustainability Laboratory launched its conversation series, Exploring the Sustainability Challenge. And I was privileged to interview Tom only a few months before his passing, in a session where he shared his views and experience in a very personal and moving way. Although already very ill at the time, Tom delivered a powerful, eloquent, and deeply inspiring performance, probably one of his last. Tom's work and legacy will continue to inspire people for years to come, and what he started during his lifetime will provide enlightened guidance, especially to young people who are eager to join in a global collaborative design challenge of making the world a better place, ensuring the well-being of all the myriad beings who inhabit our beautiful planet. Thank you again for honoring Tom. With us today is Tom's daughters, Annie, Betsy, and Kata, and I would like to invite Annie to say a few words. Annie, please.
Thank you all so very much for this unbelievable honor. It is, a wonderful honor, but it's a little sad, of course, that my father couldn't be here to be inducted himself today. But Michael, thank you very much for taking his place and honoring him. My father was a giant in the conservation world. He truly was, and he was a pioneer in many ways. But he was also such an incredibly humble man that with any recognition, he would usually just in passing, put it in the title of his email and not really give that much, celebration to it. I think my sisters and I recognized how important any recognition was for him, and this is a very big one. My father was, he was a connector. He was someone who put pieces together, who put people together. And I think that is where his genius lay, that he loved the natural world. He understood it as a scientist and a biologist, but he also recognized the role that other people and other industries, policymakers, economists, lawyers, whoever you were, whether you were collecting specimens in the jungle or if you were, at the climate change convention, you were part of the big picture. I think that many people worried that once he left this world, that there would not be someone who could step into his shoes. But the bottom line is he wanted us all to step into his shoes and to carry, his fight forward to save this planet for humans. So thank you again so much for this incredible honor. Thank you, IGIHOF. I love the acronym. It's fantastic. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Annie, and back to you, Tom.
The honor is really ours. So thank you very much for joining us today. We already had the pleasure of hearing from Bob Taylor a bit earlier, and it's our pleasure now to induct Taylor Guitars into the Hall of Fame. Taylor Guitars is among a handful of manufacturing companies that are both large. Taylor is one of the largest guitar producers in the world, and transformational. Taylor Guitars is transforming the way the industry procures raw materials and sustains ecosystems and local economies that we all depend on. Accepting for Taylor Guitars are co-founder Bob Taylor and the Director of Natural Resource Sustainability, Scott Paul.
Everybody, we're really honored to be able to accept this award today. I've already had a chance to speak, so I won't say much more, except for I'd like to introduce Scott Paul, who's my partner in crime. He's the one that with me together, we find the motive, the means, and the opportunity to try and do something good. And I've known him since 2007, when we joined a project together when he was director of the forest campaign at Greenpeace, and we've had a great partnership. Without Scott, I wouldn't be able to go nearly as far with the things that I'd like to do. And Scott?
Yes, thank you. It's indeed a great honor to be inducted into IGIHOF. And if I may, just a few very personal words. In the early 90s, when I was first starting out as an environmental professional, I was a unpaid, commonly very intimidated intern at the White House Office on Environmental Policy. And fellow inductees, Bob Watson and Tom Lovejoy, I had the privilege to be in the room with them often. They were at the table, I was sitting in the back, and they had a tremendous influence, the conversations they led. So it's an honor to be in the same class with Bob and Tom. And to the family of Tom, I'm sure I join a long list of environmental professionals who thank you for the contributions that Tom made, inspiring a generation of policy professionals and environmental activists. And I truly don't think I would be here today if not for the influence that Tom Lovejoy had in my life. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as well. Thank you.
Super. Thank you so much for this honor. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's so great to have you with us. And as I said, Bob Taylor has agreed to be on with us later live to take your questions at the end of the second keynote. You know, increasingly, people are recognizing that feeding the world requires new approaches to agriculture that will no longer deplete soils, but actually regenerate them. Understanding Ag is the largest regenerative agriculture consulting firm in the world. They're ushering in a new era of regenerative agriculture that leads to more productive, profitable, and resilient farms everywhere. Their mission is to educate farmers, ranchers, and communities so they can adopt proven ecological principles to regenerate living ecosystems. Accepting on behalf of Understanding Ag is Gabe Brown.
Thank you. This is truly an honor. On behalf of my partners, Kathy Richburg, Shane New, Dr. Alan Williams, and our many consultants and advisors, we want to thank you for inducting us into the Hall of Fame. It's truly an honor. If I may, I'll share my screen. I have a small PowerPoint put together that just explains a little bit about Understanding Ag and what we are doing to try and change the world and bring the world back to a place we think it once was. So Understanding Ag's goals are simply, how do we work with nature instead of against her? We believe that the definition of regenerative agriculture is one that is farming and ranching in synchrony with nature to repair, restore, rebuild, revitalize ecosystem function, starting with all life in the soil and moving to all life above the soil, including mankind. What we do, we have a team of farmer consultants that work closely with farmers, ranchers, industries, and communities to help move their operations forward in a way that we have termed what we call education of 634. And what 634 is, there's 6 common principles of soil health. And we can travel anywhere in the world, and these 6 principles take place. Along with that, there's 3 rules of adaptive stewardship. And these 6 principles and 3 rules drive the 4 ecosystem processes. We tell people what we do is not rocket science. It's simply following the time-tested ecological principles to move these ecosystem processes forward. And what we found by doing that, we're able to help others. We have a nonprofit called Soil Health Academy, where we have online courses. We have 1-, 2-, and 3-day workshops. What this does is allow others outside of our immediate area to be able to take advantage of our experiences and the work that we're doing. What we're seeing is when farmers, ranchers, communities implement these principles and rules to drive the processes, we're seeing significant reductions in synthetic fertilizers, in pesticide use. Animal health improves dramatically. We see improved profit margins for both the farmers, ranchers, and those in the supply chain. We're mitigating climate change by taking massive amounts of carbon back out of the atmosphere, putting it into the soil. We're improving biodiversity. We have a real loss of biodiversity going on around the world. Regenerative agriculture is changing that, and we're increasing biodiversity. It's also improving the mental health of those that are involved, and We're providing for generational succession from one generation to the next. Off-farm improvements that we're seeing, it's all these ecosystem services that farms and ranches are providing. We're seeing improved water quality, improved air quality, reduced flooding, increased carbon sequestration, improved recreational opportunities, increased food nutrition. And this is a bigger one, a one that you're going to hear more and more of. We're working closely with a team of scientists to monitor and prove that food products grown in and on healthy soils have significantly wider array of phytonutrient compounds, thus improving human health. And the other thing it's doing is improving rural economies all over the world. What we focus on is what we call common ground for common good. We firmly believe that as human beings, we can agree on at least 85% of the things. We all want to mitigate climate change. We all want clean air. We want clean water. We want improved resiliency in our food supply chain. We want food that is higher in nutrient density. Why can't we come together then and find common ground for common good? What we've done so far, our firm is currently consulting on over 33 million acres across Mexico, North America, the United States, Canada, and the UK. We are significantly increasing the amount of acres and people that we are working with, and we're expanding rapidly. It's our goal that in the not too distant future, we'll be on the majority of food producing continents around the world. That's a brief synopsis of Understanding Ag and Soil Health Academy and what we're about. Once again, on behalf of our entire team, I want to thank IGIHOF for bestowing this prestigious honor on us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabe, and thank you, Understanding Ag. What an impressive and important piece of work. Sir Robert Watson has been called one of the most influential environmental scientists in the world, and he has contributed to multiple assessment reports that inform policymakers. Dr. Watson has been chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity Ecosystem Services, chief scientist at the UK Department of Food, Environment and Rural Affairs, chief scientist and director of environmental and socially sustainable development at the World Bank, Associate Director for Environment in the U.S. Office of Science and Technology Policy in the White House, Director of the Science Division and Chief Scientist for the Office of Mission to Planet Earth at NASA, and he is Professor Emeritus and former Strategic Director at the University of East Anglia. As you can so clearly see, Robert Watson is being inducted for a lifetime of achievements and contributions. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Watson.
Thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see me. First, let me say it's a special honor that I really appreciate. And it's even more special because Tom Lovejoy is also receiving it today. Tom is a longtime friend and colleague and played a major role in the whole issue of biodiversity, but coupling it to issues like climate change. So it's a double honor to be recognized at the same time that Tom was recognized. As you've just heard, I've almost had a double career. I've been a science advisor in NASA, the Space Agency, the White House, the World Bank, and the UK government. But probably more interesting for most people is that I have chaired a large number of international assessments. And these assessments are critical. They join the scientific community to the policy community, both at the national and international level. The first one that I chaired was the stratospheric ozone depletion. This was an issue about how man-made chemicals, chlorine and bromine, could destroy stratospheric ozone and lead to an increase in ultraviolet radiation at the Earth's surface, causing skin cancer to light-skinned people. The ozone assessments, which started in 1980, and continue until today, have had a profound effect on national and international policy. There's a complete elimination now of all long-lived chlorine and bromine containing compounds, and most medium-lived chlorine and bromine containing. So the assessment, joining the academic community with governments, and equally important, with industry, has really safeguarded society from skin cancer in the future. I've also been fortunate enough to chair 3 totally different international biodiversity assessments: the Global Biodiversity Assessment, the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, and the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Service. These assessments have had a profound effect on national policies with respect to biodiversity and international policies. And indeed, these are the Millennium Ecosystems that gave the scientific basis for the so-called IGIHOF targets, 20 targets agreed by governments around the world to safeguard, conserve, and restore biodiversity. And IPBES, the latest assessment I chaired, is providing the scientific evidence for a post-2020 framework and targets on biodiversity. Next was climate change. I was fortunate enough to chair the Intergovernmental Platform on Climate Change until 2002, and it's had a profound effect nationally and internationally. It led to the Kyoto Protocol, and it's provided the scientific basis for the so-called Paris Agreement, where countries all around the world have agreed to limit human-induced climate change to no more than 2 degrees Celsius and preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And I'll come back to climate change in a few minutes. The agricultural assessment that I was the director for emphasized issues like food waste, the role of international trade and subsidies in international trade, genetic modification, organic farming, and as we just heard from the previously, regenerative agriculture. So it really puts some of the key issues on the table of how we could have a more sustainable agricultural system. But probably one of the most intriguing documents I was allowed to co-chair was a document recently called Making Peace with Nature. A small group of us looked at all of the assessments on environment and development for the last 10 years. We looked at all of these and we synthesized and integrated it. And we came up with some very obvious conclusions. Unfortunately, we're seeing today unprecedented changes in the environment, and not good changes, almost exclusively negative changes around the world. And these changes in climate, biodiversity, pollution, land degradation, they're all undermining human well-being. And what we recognized was these issues are not just environmental issues, they're development issues, they're economic issues, security, social, moral, and ethical issues. And if we don't address these issues, they will undermine human well-being for current and future generations. They'll adversely affect food security, water security, human health. They'll undermine any attack on poverty, on gender equality, on conflict and peace. So we really need to recognize that these so-called environmental issues are far more than a set of environmental issues. The trouble is we're not meeting any of the agreed international targets. We're missing the targets on climate. We're missing the targets on biodiversity. We're missing the targets on pollution. And fundamentally, the solutions exist. We need technologies, policies, and behavior change. This is not just technology, it's not just policy, but behavior change of individuals, communities, governments, and the private sector are all crucial, which means all of us have a role in trying to make the world more sustainable. We need to transform our economic systems, transform our financial systems, and transform our productive systems, especially energy and agriculture. In the economic system, we need to get rid of the subsidies that actually don't help poor people and lead to further environmental degradation. We have to recognize nature has value, both social value and economic value, and these issues have to be taken into account in decision making. But it's clear the two sectors that are destroying the earth most are the energy sector, the way we produce and use energy, and the agricultural sector. I was very pleased to hear the previous talk on regenerative agriculture. That can indeed play a role. And in fact, I've just been asked to chair a small report on protein-based meat and cultivated meat. Can we eat artificial meat? Will it be more sustainable than our livestock industry today? It's a fascinating issue, which as I say, I'm now currently chairing, basically. We also have to recognize that chemicals, waste and pollution are just as important as climate change and loss of biodiversity. So we need to act now. So clearly, what's the bottom line? Well, the bottom line is the time for action is now. We know what to do. We're just not doing it. There's a lot of emphasis on being net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. But let's be quite honest, we need that, but it's not the critical issue. The critical issue is now to 2030. We need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% across the globe between now and 2030. Politicians can easily, and business can easily say, we'll be net zero by 2050. No one will be around to keep those individuals holding their promise, but they will be around between now and 2030. And we need the commitment between now and 2030 where we can monitor the actions to make sure they're just not rhetoric. So fundamentally, we know what to do. We need everyone involved. The time to move is now. It will be good for human well-being. It will actually be good for the economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. That was inspiring and impressive and an important call to action. And by the way, if you've ever eaten anything, chances are you've already encountered our final inductees products many, many times. World-Centric manufactures compostable food service and packing products made from rapidly renewable plant-based materials. But going a large step further, World-Centric donates 25% of its profits to support grassroots social and environmental organizations around the world. They are a certified B Corporation, which means a corporation for public benefit, and they are a leader in rethinking business as usual in a global marketplace. Accepting on behalf of World-Centric is Kevin Kimbrough.
That was such a great introduction. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great day today, and thank you so much for having me. So I'm Kevin Kimbrough, the regional manager in the South Central part of the United States for World-Centric, and I have the privilege of representing them today. And I wanted to say that it's such an honor for us at World-Centric to be recognized and inducted and to be part of such an amazing community of people who are working and sacrificing to help truly make our environment and our world a better place. So thank you very much, everyone. I think we're toward the last of the inductees, and I do have great news for everybody. I am not long-winded and won't take much of your time today, but I do have some slides I was hoping to show you to go a little further into the company. You know, I wanted to start with saying exactly what you see on the screen here. Together, we can make a difference. And we wholeheartedly believe and live by this every day that we go into the field. So we're excited that we're in our 18th year here at World-Centric, and I'm so happy to be a part of an organization that has truly stood by their core values and the mission to be of service to people and the planet. Now, we were started in a garage in California in 2004 by our founder and CEO, Asim Das. And by 2009, we had converted to a for-profit social enterprise and the mission and our values never change to this day. Every year, we donate 25% of our profits to grassroots organizations around the world. We also have a local giving program where, as a regional team, we can support issues in the direct communities that we live. We donate products to shelters and other grassroots organizations. We sell the product to support the mission. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the man himself, Asim Das, and let him go and tell you everything in his own words. So go ahead, take it away, Asim.
So I think when you start something, it is due to all your past experiences and your thinking, which leads you to the point where you want to do something. And for me, I had been always very passionate about social and environmental issues. I grew up in India, and I saw a lot of poverty in India, and that brought me a lot of social awareness and how people live with all the social disparities. And then when I came to the US, I became much more aware of the environmental issues, especially related to all the consumption which happens in a rich country and all the resulting waste. I was not actively involved in these social and environmental issues. I studied computer science, I was working in the tech industry, but there was always something missing. In high tech, you're working on challenging problems. They're very intellectual, very interesting, but they don't connect to your daily life. Those kind of couple of things led to thinking about, well, what can I do? In 2003, the Iraq War was happening, and I got fairly involved as an activist. One of the things which came out of that whole period was that there's a lot of misinformation as to what's happening in the world. So the question was, well, what could I do to change that or to make a difference? What seen was that what was needed was to raise awareness, to get people more educated around environmental and social issues. So World Centric started as a nonprofit to raise awareness of these issues and to connect these issues and decisions people make in their daily lives. We started by showing a lot of documentaries on these various issues, not only social and environmental issues, but issues on economics, on human rights, on economic justice, environmental justice. As a way to support the organization, we started to sell products, plant-based products made out of sustainable materials, which have a smaller footprint in terms of carbon emissions, energy used, and as well as are compostable. We exist to make a difference in the world. We look at ourselves as a company which wants to change the world, both environmentally and socially. And what we do is to make products which are good for the environment, and then with any profits we make, we try to do good with that money by changing people's life. It's very important for companies to ask themselves, why do they exist? If you ask most companies, they'll tell you actually what they do, but not why they do what they do. For us, it's been always very clear since we were a nonprofit. We are here to make a difference in the world and change the world to be a better place.
So tell me, am I back on presentation screen now?
Presentation, Kevin.
The shared video threw me off. I was like, that's a new one. Thank you for doing that. So in the conversation of our giving program, as we've grown, we were able to give more and more each year, with the last year being a total of around $1.8 million. And a few of the many impact programs that we support that we're so proud of, one being Raising the Village here in Uganda, working for community development. Another is Amazon Frontlines for rainforest protection. Women's Global Education Project, supporting comprehensive school scholarships for 220 young women in Kenya. And the list goes on. I had the privilege of being a part of the giving team this year, and it was amazing to see firsthand the impact that we were able to make because of the products that we produce. We also have a lot of certifications that we are very proud of. So we also have a lot of certifications that we're really proud of, one of them being BPI, another one being the Forest Stewardship Council. Our goal is to protect our forests using renewable agricultural byproducts that take less energy to produce than petroleum-based plastics. And our compostable products will turn into soil in 2 to 4 months in a commercial processing facility. We are extremely proud that we only sell sustainable, compostable products. We've been doing this from the beginning. We do it now, we'll do it to the end. It's just who we are. I love being a part of this company. So thank you again. This induction means so much to us. We appreciate your time today and all of your hard work. And we know together we can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And please join me in congratulating and thanking our 2021-2022 IGIHOF inductees. This is seriously an impressive group of people and organizations, and they deserve not only our support and our thanks, but also our own commitments to making the world a better place. And now it's my great honor to introduce our second keynote speaker. This is someone who I've had the pleasure of working with as a friend and a colleague. He is also an IGIHOF inductee himself. I'm talking about Dr. Michael Mann, Director of the Center for Science, Sustainability, and the Media at the University of Pennsylvania. If you pay attention to climate change at all, you've almost certainly heard his name. Dr. Mann was the lead author on a research paper that mapped increases in global temperatures over the last 1,200 years or so. In that paper, they created a graph showing the extraordinary rise in temperatures during the 20th century. That graph came to be known as the hockey stick, as it attracted the ire of climate deniers and right-wing pundits and politicians. Dr. Mann's contributions to climate science have been numerous and substantial, both through his own research and his participation in the IPCC's third assessment report. He chaired the National Academy of Sciences Frontiers of Science in 2003, and he is a fellow of the American Geophysical Union and the American Meteorological Society. He is also the recipient of numerous prestigious awards for his scientific contributions. The hockey stick graph also thrust Dr. Mann into the public and political spotlight in an unusual way at a crucial time in the fight to control climate change. This gives him a unique perspective on the greatest challenge of our time. He is author of several important books about climate change and the struggle to help politicians and the public engage effectively, including The Hockey Stick and the Climate Wars, The Madhouse Effect, Dire Predictions, and the New Climate War, among others. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Mann.
Well, thanks so much, my friend. It's great to be here with you. It's great to share the stage with Bob Watson and Tom Lovejoy and the other very deserving inductees. I will talk about this defining challenge, the defining crisis of our time, the climate crisis, and sort of the ongoing battle to really do something about it. Let me share my screen. Hopefully this will work. And all right, you've seen my first slide there? Yep. Okay. So let me start out by talking about the projections that were made decades ago, nearly a half century ago. This graph right here is showing an extremely successful prediction of both the levels of carbon pollution that we would see in the atmosphere by now if we continued with our reliance on fossil fuels and the warming of the planet that would result from that. Now, these calculations weren't done by Bob Watson or my fellow scientists who contributed to the various reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. No, these projections were made by none other than ExxonMobil, their own scientists, in a report that was never released to the public, where they in fact referred to the potential consequences of ongoing burning of fossil fuels, of our continued reliance on fossil fuels, as catastrophic. And it would lead to catastrophic events. And as I speak to you now, as we all know, we're seeing those catastrophic events. We're seeing them play out in real time, most profoundly just over the last 24 hours in the form of Hurricane Ian, an unprecedented storm in many respects. So what did ExxonMobil do? They hid that report. They spent millions, hundreds of millions of dollars attacking independent scientists who had come to the very same conclusions that their own scientists had secretly come to, and doing everything they could, along with other fossil fuel companies, to prevent meaningful action on climate, to block any efforts to decarbonize our economy, to move away from fossil fuels. Now, if we had acted on this problem, 2 decades ago, when Bob was still chair of the IPCC, we would have had a much easier task on our hands. We would have been able to lower those carbon emissions fairly gently to keep warming below this critical danger level of 1.5 Celsius, 3 degrees Fahrenheit. What decades of inaction, thanks to ExxonMobil and other fossil fuel companies, what that has bought us is a much steeper trip down that slope. If you like, we no longer have a bunny slope on our hands if you're a skier. We've got a black double diamond slope, as Bob referred to earlier. We've got to lower carbon emissions by 50% by the end of this decade if we are to have any chance of keeping warming below 3 degrees Fahrenheit. And the impacts, as I said, they're no longer subtle. We're seeing them play out in real time. The beginning of the collapse of the ice sheets, raising sea level, which combines with these more ferocious tropical storms and hurricanes that we're seeing, like Fiona, which was the strongest hurricane ever experienced by Canada. And of course, we have seen play out over the last 24 hours, the disaster of Hurricane Ian, essentially a Category 5 storm. It was 1 or 2 miles per hour shy of Category 5 status. My guess is like Michael, Hurricane Michael, which bears my name, from 2018. I would bet on it being upgraded to a Category 5 storm in post-season analysis. And the consequences, the impacts were those of effectively a Cat 5 storm making landfall on a very populated coastline. The heat waves that we've seen summer after summer, 2 consecutive record-breaking global temperatures, the hottest temperature ever reliably recorded on the planet in Death Valley 2 years ago, and then that record was actually broken the following year. And the heat waves in North America, in Europe, they're part of this trend of more frequent and more intense heat waves as the planet warms up. This isn't rocket science. You make the planet hotter, you're going to see more frequent and more intense heat waves, like the catastrophic heat waves that are being dealt with by India. You combine that heat and that drought, warmer summers, you dry out the soil, so you get worse summer drought. You combine the drought and the heat, again, not rocket science, you get these catastrophic wildfires that we're seeing play out every year. This is one of my favorites. This is a screen capture. This is exactly as this Washington Post article appeared on my screen last spring. And so let me read it to you. California facing drought crisis as water shortages mount and fire danger escalates. Brought to you literally by ExxonMobil. You can't make this stuff up. Now, the heat dome last summer, yeah, that was climate change. We can do attribution. The National Hurricane Center Atlantic Division director yesterday said in an interview on CNN, which I've been trying to correct in my own interviews. He said you can never connect one particular event to climate change. It's just not true. We can now use climate models to look at counterfactual scenarios where we hadn't warmed the planet through greenhouse gas emissions, and the scenario that we actually have, where we have warmed up the planet. And we can look at how often a particular event happens in each of those cases. And if we see an increase, a factor of 1,000 or more, if we see what should have been a 40,000 year event happen, and the climate change simulation tells us that, yeah, this is the sort of thing that we can expect happens now, we can attribute that event. We can say it's extremely unlikely it would have happened in the absence of the warming of the planet from human-caused greenhouse pollution. And so summer after summer, those wildfires like Lake Tahoe, it's a sort of one of those scenes that seared into my consciousness as wildfires for the first time ever actually leaped over the Sierra Nevada from California into Nevada. And we saw these images of Lake Tahoe shrouded in wildfire smoke, an almost dystopian image. Not unlike the images that I saw down in Australia when I went there a couple of years ago to do a sabbatical. I went to Australia to do a sabbatical studying the impacts of climate change on extreme weather events. And instead I arrived to witness those events play out. I arrived just as what is now referred to as the Black Summer, the austral summer of 2019, 2020 was underway, and we saw record heat and drought and wildfires, bushfires blanket the continent. And once again, those images that are seared into our consciousness that convey an almost post-apocalyptic reality that we now face, a dystopian reality that we now face. This is the same region of Australia. A year and a half later, it isn't wildfires, droughts, it's houses floating down rivers like we saw yesterday in Florida. We saw houses literally lifted off of their foundations and floating out to sea because of the catastrophic flooding that we're now seeing, these extreme flooding events. And the critics will say, well, make up your mind. Is it, let's see. Is it, the heat, the drought, the wildfires, or is it the floods? Will you climate scientists make up your mind? Well, it's both. We expect greater extremes at both ends of the hydrological cycle as we continue to warm the planet. That's what the predictions are, and that's what we're seeing. So there's no contradiction there. And sometimes those extremes combine in catastrophic ways that we might not have envisioned until we see them play out, where the wildfires in a summer wildfires destabilize the topsoil, they kill off the vegetation. And when those drenching winter rains come, and they will still come, they combine with the destabilized soil to give us those deadly mudslides like we've seen in California, like we've seen in the Western United States, like we've seen in Europe. Like we've seen I'm here in Philadelphia right now giving this presentation. And these are scenes that we saw in Pennsylvania in the wake a year ago of Hurricane Ida, not Ian, but Ida, which was a storm that strengthened extremely rapidly on those very warm waters of the Gulf. It entrained a huge amount of moisture into it, and it dumped out that moisture in the form of record flooding in cities like New York and Philadelphia. This is the underpass that I go through when I drive from State College to Philadelphia. That's what it looked like in the wake of Ida, more than 20 feet of flooding there. So we're seeing the climate crisis play out in real time where we live around the world. This is the face of climate change. It's no longer distant. It's no longer subtle. It's no longer about polar bears in the Arctic decades from now. It's about catastrophic extreme weather events, deadly weather events, sea level rise, coastal inundation that's happening right now. And no place is safe. If you don't live along the coastline, you don't have to worry about a landfalling hurricane. you still have to worry about these catastrophic wildfires and heat waves and floods that are a consequence of a warming of the planet. So the forces of inaction, I call them the inactivists. I know Bob and Tom are very familiar with them. For years, they denied the basic science of climate change. They can't do it anymore because people can see it's happening with their own two eyes. So as denial has waned, as denial becomes increasingly untenable in the face of what we're witnessing, they haven't given up. Make no mistake, they haven't given up, but they've turned to other tactics like deflection, making it all about individual behavior, lifestyles, individual lifestyles. And it's important to, do everything you can to minimize your environmental impact and your carbon footprint. We should all do those things. Often they save us money, they make us healthier, they make us feel better about ourselves. They set a good example for other people. We should do all those things, but what we can't allow polluters to do is to convince us that that's all we need to do, that that's somehow a substitute for the needed systemic action, for the needed policies. Because we're not going to achieve the reductions in carbon emissions that we need without policies that incentivize a rapid transition away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy. And we can't pass those policies ourselves. We need our politicians to do that. Division, getting us fighting with each other online and elsewhere. It's divide and conquer. If they can generate conflict and division within the climate community, within the environmental community, then we no longer present a united front demanding action, demanding change. And ironically, doomism, and this has become quite insidious. They're good people who have fallen victim to doomism, but there's some bad actors who are actually promoting that doomism, because if they can convince us that it's too late to do anything about the problem, it potentially leads us down the same path of inaction as outright denial. They don't care about the path we take. They just care about the destination. They don't want us on the front lines, they want us on the sidelines. And doomism is one of the ways of doing that. But I'll talk specifically about delay. Delay is the new denial, as I've said. Promises of future tech, massive carbon sequestration, geoengineering, all of these things that industry loves to promise us that they can do, that they will do 5 or 10 years down the road, as an excuse for business as usual, as an excuse for continued reliance on fossil fuels, promises of future technology that may never materialize in a meaningful way and may essentially force us down a road where there's no turning back, where we commit to truly catastrophic levels of warming. So beware of politicians who promise we can just adapt to these changes. Marco Rubio, fellow Floridians, they can just grow fins and gills and adapt to the encroaching seas. Apparently that's the solution. Former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who's now been ousted in favor of the Labour government that is supporting meaningful climate action, a really important development. Morrison, love to tout resilience and adaptation, and these words that are empty rhetoric, but they sound like the promise of action, when in fact they're just an excuse for business as usual. Geoengineering, not surprising the Koch brothers love funding specials on geoengineering. We'll just shoot particles into the stratosphere, dump iron into the ocean. We'll continue burning fossil fuels, but we will manipulate our global environment in other ways to try to offset the warming effect of increasing carbon pollution. What could possibly go wrong? People like Rex Tillerson, the former CEO of ExxonMobil, love geoengineering, again, because it's just an excuse for their current business model. It's an excuse for business as usual. Bill Gates and other titans of industry who love these techno fixes. If your only tool is a hammer, as they say, everything looks like a nail. And if your only tool is technology, everything looks like an engineering problem. But that's not the real solution. And if you've seen the movie Don't Look Up, it's a very thinly veiled commentary, very thinly veiled satire ridiculing this idea that we can just engineer our way out of this problem. And there's a villain in the movie who resembles sort of a composite of Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, who promises a technical solution to this comet that's going to strike the Earth. And I won't give away the ending, but turns out we probably shouldn't have listened to him. So it's important to realize there's both urgency and agency here. The urgency is clear. Yeah, COVID-19, terrible crisis, has led to hundreds of millions, tens of millions of unnecessary deaths that could have been avoided if we had listened to science. And too often, for political reasons, the scientists were ignored. It was sort of almost like a sort of a replay of the climate change debate that was accelerated by an order of magnitude in the time scale that it played out. As deadly as the pandemic has been, we will get past it. It will be in our rearview mirror, and we will still be faced with an even greater looming crisis that will take far more lives if we fail to act, the climate crisis. So that's the urgency. We understand the urgency, but let me talk about the agency, because we have the solutions. We don't need a miracle, Bill Gates, and we don't need these dangerous techno fixes. What we need is to incentivize renewable energy technology. We have the technology now to decarbonize our economy. The obstacles are not technological. They are entirely political. Fossil fuel energy is actually more expensive on a levelized basis than renewable energy, but we provide all of these subsidies. Our politicians provide all these subsidies, direct and indirect, to the fossil fuel industry to prop it up, so that we're putting our thumb on the wrong end of the scale. That's the problem. We're seeing the transition nonetheless happen. The wind and solar boom is here. We are transitioning away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. It's happening. There's a saying that the Stone Age didn't end for want of stones, and the fossil fuel age won't end for want of fossil fuels. It'll end because something better's come along, and that's what's happened here. The transition, though, on its own, without market incentives, without explicit policies to accelerate that transition, won't decarbonize our economy fast enough to avoid crossing those dangerous warming thresholds. So we need policies. We need to stop new fossil fuel infrastructure. We need to lower carbon emissions, as we said, by as much as we lowered them in the year following the pandemic, the emergence of the pandemic, but we've got to do that year after year for 10 years. And we're not going to do that by changing our lifestyles. We're not going to do that through economic shutdowns and social distancing. We're going to do that by decarbonizing our economy, by not building new fossil fuel infrastructure, as the very conservative International Energy Agency, which has been no cheerleader for fossil fuel, for renewable energy over the years. And yet they've stated very clearly that there can be no new fossil fuel infrastructure now if we're going to avoid those dangerous warming levels. There's some reason to be cautiously optimistic. We've seen meaningful progress. The science works in our favor. And I know just in the time that Bob was chair of the IPCC, there's been some very compelling science that sort of changed our view of things like the warming commitment. We used to think that we would warm for decades if we stopped burning carbon because of the thermal inertia of the oceans that continue to warm up. It turns out that as we model the system more comprehensively, and in particular, we incorporate the behavior of the ocean carbon cycle, we now understand that that committed warming is offset by the fact that the ocean continues to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. And so if we stop emitting carbon, those CO2 levels start to come down. Those two effects roughly cancel out. And the net effect is that the warming that we get is roughly a consequence of our cumulative emissions up to now. If we stop burning carbon, planetary temperatures stabilize very quickly. There is a direct and immediate consequence of our efforts to decarbonize our economy. Other good news, the commitments that we saw in Glasgow, if they are met, and that's an important caveat, are now enough to potentially keep warming below 2 degrees Celsius. So that's the good news. The bad news is those are just promises. They have to be kept, and they have to be, for example, they have to translate to policies that don't fund new fossil fuel infrastructure. And 2 degrees Celsius is still too much. We want to keep warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius to avoid some of the more dangerous consequences of warming. We've seen meaningful progress, policy progress in Australia that we didn't expect to see just in recent months. A new government that is now making bold commitments on the world stage to in terms of their efforts to decarbonize. The United States, of course, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act now is signed into law by President Biden, passed by 50 Democrats in a tie-breaking vote of a Democratic vice president. Doesn't go far enough. It gets us maybe 40% emissions, 40% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030. We've got to go further. So if you don't want a coal state Democrat like Joe Manchin to be the arbiter, to be the gatekeeper of what sort of climate policy can pass the Senate, if you want even more aggressive climate policy, then you've got to turn out in these midterm elections, because if we see a larger majority for climate action in our Congress, we can get more aggressive policies that can get us below that 50%, up to that 50% reduction target, and maybe beyond that. And so I'll leave it here. What gives me optimism more than anything else is the children of the world, the youth climate movement, the way they've recentered this conversation where it always needed to be, about our ethical obligation not to destroy our planetary home for them and future generations. It's been a game changer. And of course, they continue to be attacked for it. Fossil fuel companies, in a memo, another one of those reports that was, or these were actually tweets that were released, showed that fossil fuel companies were strategizing about ways to intimidate and to discredit youth climate protesters because they're such a threat to them. You have fossil fuel chairmen who are having their children come to them now and saying, "Daddy, why are you destroying the planet?" It's a huge development, but we can't leave it to the children. They've opened the door for us. We've got to go through. We've got to make sure that their efforts aren't in vain, that we now do what they can't do, vote for climate champions, use our voice in every, so that we don't mortgage this planet for future generations, so that we don't leave behind barren, dead coral reefs and a degraded planet. There's still time to make sure that that not be our legacy. And so I will leave it there, and I'll be happy if we have some time to answer some questions.
Michael, thank you very, very much for that. We will now, sorry about the echo, folks. We'll now open the floor for your questions, and you can just speak up and ask questions of both Mike Mann and Bob Taylor. And on behalf of IGIHOF, I'd like to kick this off with a question from the IGIHOF perspective. You know, this Hall of Fame and the group that run it come out of the business community, and they're very focused on innovation, first to market pioneers that lead the way and show the way to everyone else. And Bob and Michael, I would love to get your thoughts about where you see us, since one of you is a scientist and one of you is an entrepreneur. Where do you see us on this curve towards reaching critical mass, where effective climate action becomes a part of daily life of every company, of every community, of every city and state, every government, and really reflects the kind of all-out commitment that we all recognize that we need? And I'd love to hear from both of you on that question.
You have a particular order you wanted to go in?
You go right ahead.
Sure, thanks, Bob. So, you know, let me first be very clear, technical innovation is very important. There are the right innovations and there are the wrong innovations. Geoengineering technology, in my view, is one of the wrong innovations. The idea that nuclear energy can save us, which is promoted by Bill Gates, who has been very pessimistic, has expressed great pessimism about the potential for renewable energy to meet our energy needs, even though there are credible studies, Stanford, UC Berkeley, elsewhere, that show that we can meet our needs through renewable energy with the proper economic incentives. But people like Bill Gates dismiss the role that renewable energy can play in the transition, and instead end up promoting things like geoengineering and carbon capture and risky nuclear technology, in which, by the way, Bill Gates is personally invested in the modular reactors that he's arguing can save us. So that bothers me a bit. In fact, it's very much mirrored in the character that I referred to in Don't Look Up, who stands to profit from a very dangerous intervention. So innovation is really important. Technology is going to have to be part of the solution, but the right technology. I'm impressed by the potential, for example, with green hydrogen. I think it's something we really have to look into. I think we have to recognize that there's potential to improve batteries, but there's also, smart grid technology that we can bring to bear, adaptive grid technology. There's, pumped hydro. It isn't just batteries. We've got pumped hydro. We've got molten salt heat storage. There are lots of technological innovations that are going to make the transition even easier. The point is, we can do it now with existing tech. And this is one of the points that's been made in studies by people like Mark Jacobson at Stanford. We can do it now with existing technology. We don't need a miracle. We don't need magic new technology. We can do it now. We need to get started. We need the incentives for doing that. And by the way, we will learn by doing. We will find economies of scale, and there will be new technologies that do make it easier. But the idea that we should wait for that technology and not get started with the technology we have now, I think is very misplaced. Finally, the business community is an extremely important part of the solution. I've talked about governmental policy, I've talked about individual action, but it may be that some of the most important actions are going to come from the business community. Efforts by major businesses to decarbonize their supply chains, to diminish, their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And there are a lot of companies that are working hard to do that. We see the finance industry starting to recognize their role in not financing new fossil fuel infrastructure. So by all means, we need the business world working with us as part of the solution. We're not going to do it without their help.
Well, I agree with so much of what you said. I think that the business community can help by not offering the most go-to convenience that there possibly could be. When we go to the grocery store, even the fresh produce is all now packed in plastic bubble packs, right? Or you go to Costco and you buy a thumb drive, and it comes on a piece of cardboard this big with that you got to take a hacksaw to get into. The waste, the size of the waste compared to what you're getting out of it right now is a little high. I went to In-N-Out Burgers yesterday and bought myself a hamburger on the way home from an appointment, and I unwrapped it in the paper, and I noticed for the first time that they wrote, In-N-Out has been wrapping their burgers in paper since 1948. Okay, good for them. They're actually telling you that to cause you to go, I think a burger wrapped in paper is way better than a burger that comes in a styrofoam to-go thing that you open up, you open it, you eat, you throw that away. I was complaining today about some of the taco shops around here that they don't want to waste their salsa, so they individualize it so you can't take so much. And I know some of them are throwing away 1,000 little plastic salsa cups a day. You get 6 of them in a bag, you open one, the rest of them go in the trash. So in that regard, I think that business can move people towards less obvious convenience. Do you really need to put every single one of your vegetables in an individual plastic bag at the store just to get from there to home? Probably not, So I think that people themselves really need to make a change. Businesses can help, policy can help. Where I see the world going, I don't know. I think that we, as a species, we tend to change at the very last minute. And what we can try and do is urge that last minute to just move closer to us, right? And the ironic thing is, I own a company in Cameroon, and gosh, for the first 8 years, I went there 100 days a year. And it's ironic here, there's no reason for almost anybody in the United States to buy water in a plastic bottle. We have water, comes I drank from a hose when I was a kid, right? We have clean water. The irony is there, they kind of need that because they don't have clean water that they can get from places and move it around. So the places, and so there's plastic everywhere. And when it rains and floods, it comes down. And we could help with that. This is where governments should step in, you know, to try and get clean water for people. I see us fixing it because we don't want to die. It's just how sick do we have to get? You know, how many quintuple bypasses do I need before I quit smoking? We just need to quit smoking before we have the heart attack. And I hope that we do. Things like this, discussions like this help. Even though we're preaching to the choir, maybe the choir will get bigger.
Or learn how to sing.
Yeah.
Bob, if I could just follow up briefly on that question. I'm interested to know how the rest of the music industry is responding to the kind of initiatives that Taylor Guitar has undertaken in terms of procurement, forest management, and forest community development. Are these initiatives becoming commonplace, or are you still sort of the loner out there on the fringe?
We're the loner. However, we've managed to change what people, what consumers and even manufacturers think about using the quote unquote best piece of wood. You know, for example, if we're cutting ebony in Cameroon and we know that 9 out of 10 trees are going to yield ebony that's not pure black, and we've had 300 years of musical instrument tradition that says pure black is it, and now you introduce something that's not that color to change a whole entire society of musicians around the world. I'm talking about from bagpipes to bowed instruments to guitars to piano keys. They think it's supposed to be black because it was black. And so we found great adoption with that. We've even just recently, we had a breakthrough to where the piano manufacturers are willing to think of something that's not the color black of my iPhone face, right? And so the users and factories are starting to do that. The idea of going out and planting trees, taking care of that for yourself. We're doing that in Hawaii, restoring forests, and we're doing that in Cameroon. The Ebony Project in Cameroon, I do through UCLA. And so we have an institute over there that's run by UCLA, which, by the way, is their first and only foreign affiliate that UCLA has ever had. And it's called the Congo Basin Institute. And we're putting the science behind the ecology of ebony. We've planted a lot of ebony trees, and we hope to leave the bibliography of how to grow these trees by the time we're done. Working on making corridors for elephants, because the ebony tree is actually the food for elements. They're a persimmon, and elephants eat this fruit. And we want to have a grocery store for them to get from one forest to another one. So all of these initiatives are great. They'll grow. If we can be a demonstration, that's great. I would like to see more musical instrument companies put more effort into regrowth. Wood is renewable. Even fancy woods are renewable. Rosewood grows on a tree. I would like to say this stuff grows on trees. Let's grow them. The problem is you have to be patient for 75 years or 50 years or 100 years, but that 100 years is going by, whether we do something or not. So let's do it.
Thanks, Bob. There was a question someone asked in the chat, if the two of you could comment on the global disruption that's occurring because of the war in Ukraine and the leaks or potential sabotage of the pipelines under the North Sea, et cetera. Any comment about that?
I'm happy to start out with some thoughts, and I'm interested to hear Bob's thoughts as well. So, I think that the Russia's, war on Ukraine is just, if we needed a better argument for decarbonizing our world, there is no greater argument than what we've seen play out in Europe over the last year. We've seen, for example, how Russia has been able to use the world, and in particular Europe's dependence on their fossil fuels as a cudgel, as a way of preventing them from taking punitive actions against Russia. We have seen Russia, by the way, over the last 10 years, through cyber warfare in particular, do everything they can to sabotage meaningful global action on climate, because they understand that the only real economic asset they have is the fossil fuels buried beneath their ground. And so, you know, as I said, if we needed an argument for getting off of fossil fuels, this is perhaps the greatest argument there is. And in fact, let's think about it. There's the climate crisis, but one of the other great global threats is, of course, nuclear proliferation, the use of nuclear weapons. And here, once again, we see, you know, Russia threatening to do that and to escalate nuclear tensions in their effort, of course, to expand their territory and to keep us dependent on their fossil fuels. So, you know, I hope that people will take the right lessons from what's playing out. Too often people take the wrong short-term lessons. For example, the shortage in energy has led, for example, to demands for increased production of fossil fuels here in the United States. It's been used as an argument against taking the longer time scale, you know, putting in place the longer term climate policies that are necessary. This short-term crisis being used basically to thwart meaningful climate policy progress. And we've seen the Republican Party in particular try to do that. So there are lots of lessons to take away from this, but there's one basic lesson, which is that what we're seeing play out on the world stage now is the best argument possible for getting off fossil fuels, for weaning our world, our planet from fossil fuels as quickly as possible.
I'm going to say that on a topic like this, you are definitely more of an expert than me. I'll admit that I'm an imposter here today when it comes to global initiatives. We make guitars, and at Taylor, we try to focus on the fact that we make guitars. And what we say is red states and blue states love guitars, right? And so we use the guitar itself as sort of our Excalibur to bring people together to talk about these things. These projects that we do are huge for a guitar company. They're minuscule to the world or to governments, but boy, do they gain people's interest, because you think of ebony and you think of elephants and you think of music and you think of playing your guitar. So we come at it from such a different angle, because we really can't play in the space of climate modeling or deep politics as a company. We can as individuals. And of course, Taylor, you know, people might say, well, you know, what's Taylor's policy on such and such, or their thoughts? And we say, well, Taylor has 1,500 employees, right? In Southern California, in Mexico, in Amsterdam, Germany, Cameroon. Taylor itself doesn't have the thought. Our people have a conglomeration of thoughts, and we leave that to the individual. So we try to make an impact through a demonstration of what somebody very small can do. And yeah, sometimes I think it's hopeless. So, I mean, that's my answer. You know, if you go, well, what's going on with Russia, Ukraine? Yeah, it's hopeless. But I believe in people in the end to make a difference. And I love Elon Musk's love of nuclear energy. You know, he goes, we got fusion. It's out there. It's called the sun. There's all the nuclear energy. It's going to burn for another couple billion years. We can collect that energy and use it. And I love that form of nuclear energy.
Yeah, Bob, never underestimate the power to change people's mind of music, musical instruments, and gorgeous woods materials. Bob Watson, I hear, has a question. Bob?
Yes, if you can hear me. Yeah, Michael, I obviously agree with most of the things you said. I would have hoped you might have gone a bit further, though, and talked about how you can't actually look at climate change any longer without looking at the loss of biodiversity. And the reason is very simple, and land use change, that 25% of all greenhouse gases come from land use change, destruction of forests. And so the point that we made in our paper, Making Peace with Nature, is that you cannot now no longer think of climate change and biodiversity as separable issues. They are a single issue, which means the conventions have to work together, because there's too many solutions for climate change that are going to be bad for biodiversity, and even in reverse. So I think I would have hoped you would have talked a little bit more about the coupling between climate and biodiversity, and the role of land use change and agriculture, that we have to drastically change not just our energy policies, but our agricultural policies. So that was one comment. Second comment is, you're still an incredible optimist on the Paris Agreement. In my opinion, the Paris Agreement is exactly what we need. But I'll be quite candid. I see no possibility of us actually making the Paris target of less than 2 degrees. So the current pledges are basically more consistent with 2.5 to 3 degrees Celsius. You've already pointed out the US, even though we're moving now in the right direction, it's only a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions for the US. We need 60 to 70 for the US. The UK new government has just opened fracking, and it's actually now looking at more new oil and gas leases in the North Sea. You commented effectively how people have reacted to Ukraine. Biden himself said, we need more oil and gas. So I have a very hard time being optimistic about 2 degrees, let alone 1.5. And I think we need to be quite honest and more candid with the public. Yes, it's technologically feasible to hit 1.5 to 2, but nobody is going anywhere close in the right direction to reach any of those numbers. And therefore, while I also agree with you that I would not want to rely on geoengineering and nuclear, we need a plan B. And I would at least argue we should continue doing research on some of these options, because at the moment, we're not, with the way we're going forward, going to get even close to the Paris targets. So loved your talk, but I have to be rather honest with you, far less optimistic than you are about reaching these targets.
Okay, well, thanks for your comments, Bob. I really appreciate them, and I'll try to address both of them sequentially. First of all, with respect to the importance of, looking beyond the fossil fuel sector, looking at agriculture, land use, and things like regenerative agriculture. It's something I talk about in the book. You always have to make sacrifices when you're trying to fit everything into a 30-minute talk. But in the book, I do get into that. And one of the things that I try to emphasize is that this is part of a larger challenge, a larger crisis, which is, our collision course with sustainability on this planet. Climate change is just one of, is sometimes framed in terms of these these multiple global challenges that we face, planetary boundaries. Climate change is just one of them. There are many other sort of challenges that we face when it comes to living sustainably on the planet. And where I tend to, the way I sort of look at it is that with climate in particular, we don't have time to remake the global economy. We've got to solve this problem. We've got to get at least substantially started on solving this problem within the framework of sort of the market mechanisms that exist in the global economy today. So we have to work within the system to achieve those reductions, while recognizing that ultimately an ever-growing global economy, which is dependent on continued resource extraction, that is on a collision course with, any notion of a sustainable, existence on this planet. So I don't disagree with you at all. I tend to emphasize sort of the short-term need to work within the system to get off fossil fuels, while recognizing that we have to make more fundamental changes as well. And one of the reminders of that is the pandemic itself is a consequence of some of deforestation, of the fact that we're now forcing exotic organisms with novel viruses to come into contact with human populations. All of this is symptomatic of the insult on our environment from deforestation and other activities. With regard to sort of this issue of pessimism or optimism, I have been pleasantly surprised by some things that I've seen play out over the last few months. There was a lot of pessimism, in the wake of Glasgow, and I referred to a study done by one group that does argue that that the commitments, if met, have a decent chance of keeping warming below 2 degrees Celsius. There are other groups that come up with higher estimates. There's a range. There always is. There's uncertainty there, of course, especially when you start talking about economics and policy. Physical science based on pretty firm principles, but once you start getting into politics, things get a little more tenuous and the assumptions become very important. So yeah, different groups come up with different estimates. We can all agree that we're not on course to keep warming right now below 1.5 degrees Celsius, even if we meet all of those targets. Now, one of the things I commented on is in the time since Glasgow, we saw major policy progress by Australia, which was one of the more obstinate countries that refused really to meaningfully engage when it comes to reducing their carbon emissions. We've seen a dramatic turnaround from Australia. Still a lot of work to be done. The policies that they've enacted aren't perfect, but they do start to get us on the right path. Here in the United States, so when we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, under the best of circumstances, it's probably only a 40% reduction in carbon emissions. We agree with that, and even the baseline that's used makes that 40% estimate a little optimistic as well. But one of the things that went into that was that there were both good provisions, but there were sort of bad provisions that were necessary because we had to get this past Joe Manchin. One of those provisions was an expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure, new pipelines. Some of you may have read, that's gone down. Manchin, ironically, couldn't get support from enough Republicans to get that to remain in the current bill. And so that's gone now. And that was one of the things that was actually an aggravating factor rather than a mitigating factor. So that's a positive development. Now they might try to sneak that back in during, in the defense bill or something. So we always have to be vigilant. Yeah, we're nowhere near where we need to be, but we've made enough progress that I think we would be wrong-headed to tell people that that is no longer possible to keep warming below these critical danger levels when it is still a matter of policy. And then finally, geoengineering, yeah, by all means, let's research it. I don't mean let's deploy it and do field experiments. That takes us down a dangerous road in my view, at least right now. And some of the groups that are doing the research are also forming for-profit companies to profit if it's implemented. That really bothers me. But we've got to do the theoretical research, the modeling. Folks like Alan Robach, for example, have, he wrote a paper a few years ago, 20 reasons why not to do it. He was talking about aerosol, geoengineering. And so the climate modeling studies may very well provide compelling reasons not to engage in these interventions. But yeah, let's do the theoretical research by all means. But I don't like some of the ideas that are being floated when it comes to potentially starting to implement these very risky, these very risky actions, in the real world. Did I hit everything? I think I tried to hit all the points you raised, and they're very good points. And there can be a range of reasonable disagreement about a lot of this stuff. Good
Yeah,
things.
my only sort of very, very short response would be, I think we've got an equal emergency in land use change. I think if Tom Lovejoy was with us today, he'd point out that the recent study shows that we're deforesting at twice the rate in Brazil in the last 2 years than the previous 8, both in Eastern Amazonia and Western Amazonia. if it continues like that, and if Bolsonaro gets re-elected, it is quite conceivable it will actually turn the Amazonia into a pampas, basically. And that will have major consequences, not only for biodiversity, but for also climate,
But also
of course,
climate.
both local and global.
Yeah.
So I would put, that's why I would put the two issues as co-equally important.
Fair enough.
And both, of course, affect food security, water security, human health, etc. So it's why in Making Peace with Nature, we argued you had to work on them simultaneously.
Fair enough. As you know, I don't disagree at all. As I said, climate is one piece of, finding a way to live sustainably on this planet. And there's so many other dimensions of, these planetary boundaries that we really have to be worried about and thinking about and doing something about.
This is a fascinating discussion. I'd like to ask a question that a university student asked in the chat, and I think it's a brilliant question. She asked, or he asks, because we have someone who started a business at age 19 that is showing the way forward in a industry that extracts raw materials and is nudging culturally in the right direction, and we have someone who has spent the last couple of decades at least the last decade, kind of in the crucible of media and politics and policy, in addition to science. And her question, or his question, is, what can a young person who's coming out of school do besides vote differently and support, green initiatives and green behaviors that will make a meaningful difference? What advice would Bob and Mike would you give to a university student today?
I always start at home. I really always start at home. It's the thing that's right smack dab in front of you. And I'll go back to, I'll start with bottled water, and I'll move along through the things that you do. I think that if a student can realize that each one of us, well, let me just start with a premise. You cannot name one thing that improves the living conditions of a human being without using the environment. Everybody just stop and take a look at your desk, your computer, the room that you're in. There's, you have to use the environment to be able to do that. And so if we all realize that we're in the same boat, that if we want to be warm or we want to be cool, we want to be out of the rain, we want to do these things, we're going to use the environment. So I'll always start at home, like which uses of environments are wasteful, just pure waste. And I would start right there. And then after that, I think somebody's got to just get in for more. If a university student wants to do something and really wants to make an impact, they'll likely need to join up with somebody who's already going that direction, right? I started a company and I got into environmentalism accidentally over a long, long period of time. So it was 20 some years of my business career before I was doing anything other than just trying to stay in business, right? And then one day I woke up and I said, wow, I need to change some of my ways, all the way to the point where, I just bought 600 acres of cattle land in Hawaii to reforest it back into its original koa forest from ancient times, right? And that costs a lot of money, and you have to have some extra nickels in your pocket and a company that can maybe help fund it, or I've spent a lot of my own earnings to do this. And so I think that the smartest thing for a young person to do is get aligned with someone who's making a difference. I loved what I saw about trying to green up television and movie production. That's a great place to start. It's just unbelievable. And then that can move out from there. The saving of the planet needs to be crowdsourced. Governments can't do it, in my opinion. They can make policies, they can help, but it has to be crowdsourced. It has to come down to the individuals, all 7 billion of us, working towards the same thing. And then companies need to support that by making it allowable, by making purchasing choices that help people do that. And then governments need to have some regulation and do some things that only a government can pay for, because no corporation and no individual can pay for that themselves.
Yeah, so, I really appreciate the question, because it's something that I'm thinking a lot about here at the University of Pennsylvania, where I've just arrived. We have established this new center for science sustainability in the media. And I've had, and it's been surprising, because nothing like this really ever happened to me at Penn State. But here at Penn, I've had all these students come to me and ask me, how can we be involved? What can we do? How can we be part of the agenda of this center? Which is a very exciting prospect to me. And so this is something I'm thinking a lot about. What sorts of opportunities can we provide undergraduates to help them become the next part of the next generation of leaders, especially at a place like Penn, which has produced a lot of leaders in industry and in the business world. And it would be nice to use all of the infrastructure here at Penn to be generating leaders in the environmental space. And it's something that I'm thinking a lot about. I think the most important part is making them part of the conversation in the events that we have. We really want undergraduates to, we want to organize side events for them, to make opportunities for them to interact with our speakers, to make sure that they get an opportunity to ask their questions in the Q&As that we have. Like the one, for example, our first event was actually a conversation with Malcolm Turnbull, former Prime Minister of Australia. It was about the recent progress in Australia, what lessons we can learn here in the United States from them, and sort of the outlook going into these midterm elections. It's a fascinating conversation, and the students here at Penn were a very important part of that conversation. So I would say, in a very general sense, providing them opportunities at the ground level to become involved in the efforts that we are engaged in, to be part of the conversation, but also to help them sort of launch their own careers. And, and being, I think that one of the very positive things of sort of modern technology is that it's provided a natural on-ramp. Students now are sort of, communication to the world is sort of part of their being, because they grew up in the world of social media. It's just part of what you do. You interact with the rest of the world. And because of that, we have this generation of young folks who really have quite a bit of talent and ability when it comes to public communication. So let's nurture that, and let's provide them opportunities, once again, to leverage their voices. And we're seeing that with the youth climate movement. We're seeing them use their voice. Let's just provide them more opportunities to do that, and opportunities to become more effective in how they use their voices.
Well, thanks to both of you. I think this is a brilliant place to end the conversation. And I'd also like to add an additional thought, and that is that each of us has our own proclivities, our own talents, our own desires. Some of us go into making musical instruments. Some of us become scientific researchers. Some of us go into communication. Some of us regenerate soils. Some of us do all kinds of things. And so the answer to your question will also depend on who you are as a person and what makes you want to get up in the morning. And I think this really comes back kind of beautifully to the Hall of Fame as a resource, because if you look through the inductees to IGIHOF, you'll find a real diversity of approaches, of talents, of interests that are working in a crowdsourced way toward a better future. I want to thank you again, Bob and Mike, for your generous time today and your really interesting conversation and responses to these questions. And I'd like to congratulate and thank all of the IGIHOF inductees today, and those who were inducted in the past, for making such important contributions and for the generosity in showing the way and being a resource for students and the next generation of leaders. I'd like to ask Sam to take a moment on behalf of IGIHOF to say a couple of words in closing. Sam?
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. What a day. Our guest speakers were awesome. At the ripe old age of 69, you know, you wonder if you can learn anything new, but I'm going to tell you that I learned a ton today. And one of the things I learned the most was how much I appreciate the work that Mike and Bob and Tom and all the folks that have been inducted in the Hall of Fame have done. It's a tremendous honor, and I appreciate being a part of it. When we started this venture back in 2006, 2008 is when we incorporated. We really wanted to focus on recognition and education and bridge that gap between the two and provide organizations and people the platform for the message without it being too expensive. There's so much illusionary marketing out there that is disgusting. And one of the things we try to do here at IGIHOF is keep things simple, 100% volunteers in everything we do, recognition first, education second, and we don't require any of our inductees to participate financially. We just don't require that because we don't want to be a pay-to-play organization. And that's one of the reasons why we just got awarded the top-rated nonprofit from the Great Nonprofits Organization. And I'm really, really happy about that. I want to thank Kat Bryce, who's on our board, for spearheading that. I also want to mention that our first two inductees into the Hall of Fame back in 2011 at UC Merced, which is a brand new campus here in California, was Ray C. Anderson and Grundfos Pumps out of Denmark. I actually had the opportunity to sit down with Ray and talk to him a couple times about the concept of IGIHOF, and he said, Sam, do it. He said, but keep it real. Make sure you keep your standards high. And that's why we have our advisory board now that's consisting of all of our inductees like Tom. And that includes Ellen Strickland, Nancy Walsh-Sherridge, and Michael from the Solar Company and others, to Michael Gallagher, to ensure that we keep it real, that the people that in the organizations that we induct are really worthy of induction. Why? Because we want to tell their story. We want young people to learn what this is all about so they can take it to the next level. Because whether I'm pessimistic or optimistic, one thing I know for sure, I started in the ground and I'm going to end up in the ground, whether I like it or not. And so really what I can control is what I leave to my son and daughter and their children and their children's children. So to me, it's not an issue of the planet. The planet's going to take care of itself. Whether we bomb ourselves, whether we burn ourselves or whatever, planet will take care of the planet. It's whether or not we have the will to take care of a species and all the subspecies and all the other species on this planet to make us thrive so that future generations can enjoy their life here on Earth, whether it be 70 years, 7 years, or whatever. So I could talk all day on IGIHOF. It's obviously a passion, but I truly want to say I appreciate all the support and work people like you, Tom, have done, including Michael Bonelli, Jim Core, and the folks at CART, the Center for Advanced Research and Technology in Clovis, California. So anyway, that's people didn't come on this to listen to me talk. They come on to listen to Bob, Tom, and Mike. So I'll end it there. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you, Sam. And thanks to every one of you for joining us today. This concludes the 2021-2022 induction ceremony for the International Green Industry Hall of Fame. Throughout the coming year, IGIHOF will continue its mission to create a better world by recognizing, connecting pioneering leaders in the green industry and supporting the next generation of sustainability leaders. We look forward to hearing from you and to receiving your nominations, and we'll see you again next year. And with that, we wish you all the best and a very good day from the International Green Industry Hall of Fame.